Good afternoon and welcome to today's Tech Talk. My name is Noah Watkins and I am a education specialist here at Advanced Solutions and Imaginet Technologies. Today's Tech Talk will be going over custom connections in advanced steel. On today's agenda, I'll do an introduction about myself. We'll look into what a Tech Talk is. We'll look at what today's Tech Talk is that we're going to be going over. We're going to go over a little bit of some learning objectives as well. I'll do a demonstration on everything that we do go over. After that demonstration, we'll look at any upcoming Tech Talk that we have down the line. We'll look at more information about CAD Club Academy. And once that's done, we'll do a question and answer session after that for any questions that there are. A little bit about myself. Again, my name is Noah Watkins. I'm a pilot instructor and education specialist. I'm based out of Indianapolis, Indiana, and I joined Advanced Solutions in 2018. I do have my associate's degree in drafting and design technology, and I've worked as a mechanical designer and a BIM coordinator in the past. I've been using AutoCAD and Revit since 2011, and I am both certified in Revit MEP Mechanical and in AutoCAD. I'm also an Autodesk certified instructor as well. If you are on LinkedIn, you can link up with me at the following address. And I also have a list of Autodesk programs that I've used either in the past in a professional setting or I'm trained and knowledgeable in. So in looking at Tech Talks, we like to host basically a lunch and learn webinar that we go over some of the things that we look at in some of the classes or just topics a little bit more in depth. We go through different industries, different disciplines based on what we're looking for and what we're trying to find out as well. Typically, these webinars are from noon to 1 p.m. Eastern. Typically also on Wednesdays as we go through and set that up. But we like to look at different things. So maybe one week we'll look at architectural stuff, maybe look at something in Revit. Another week we might look at something more in the manufacturing, maybe in something else that we're wanting to set up and look at through there, or engineering. Whatever the discipline is, whatever the industry in, we like to go back and forth between different things, whether it be Revit, Inventor, AutoCAD, Fusion, Advanced Steel, whatever type of thing. We like to go in and focus a little bit on specific things as we're working with it. So in today's Tech Talk, we're going to be looking at custom connections in advanced steel. So what we're going to be looking at is we're going to go a little bit above and beyond just the connections that you have that you can work with through your connection vault in advanced steel. We can go in and we can take those connections that we make and we can go in through the library that's there and create custom connections that we want to use multiple times. So instead of always going and always selecting the connection that we want to place in, then going back to the library and making sure everything matches up, or instead of worrying about copying and then you don't know which one is the master and which is the child of everything that's going through, we can go through, we can make custom connections that we can use to place in easily and efficiently as we're going in. So we have different types that we can look at. So we have one beam with an end. So if we're wanting to create it at one beam with an end, at that point, we can place that in. If we want to do a beam and a specific reference point that we define and we say, hey, this is the point that we want to use, we can create a custom connection using that. We can do a custom connection between two beams, or we can do a custom connection between 3 beams. That way we can start building up that connection library. That way also we don't have to go in and change the parameters of the connection that we have as well. So we don't have to go in and specify everything that we want to have. We can start building this connection library for our company and get everything set up based on how we want to see it and what we typically use and what it's going to look like in the field. So today's learning objectives that we're going to look at, hopefully by the end of this, we'll be able to cross all these off the list, just check them off, be confident in being able to manipulate and use them. We want to go in and we want to look at the connection vault and see the different connections that we do have. So depending on if we were wanting to do a plate, if we're wanting to do an end plate or a base plate, if we're wanting to do a clip, if we're wanting to do different types of connections, we want to go through and be able to see the different connections that we have that we can use in this situation. Once we do that, we want to go in and build that custom connection based on the connection type that we want. So again, based on those 4 different types of connections that we have, we want to be able to go in and be able to set that up and utilize existing connections that we have so that we can use them in different places as well. Once we do that, we want to utilize those connections so that we can place them in the model. So not only build them and put them in the library that we do have, but afterwards be able to actually place that in the model to use based on other instances that we had that we can use moving forward. So again, looking at the custom connections that we have, when we go to our advanced steel tool palette, we have 4 different types of custom connections that we can create through there. Again, 1 beam with end, 1 beam and point, 2 beams, or 3 beams. We can go in and we can create these custom connections to use for multiple purposes. Again, instead of going back and creating it and then manipulating it, so we go in and we keep on using that connection vault to place things in and change the parameters, we can have things set up. So if we use something that's existing that we've used in another project or used and we want to use again, we can create these custom connections. They're easier to manipulate and place in and use from there. So the first type of custom connection we'll look at is the 1 beam with end. This is when we want to create a custom end plate or a custom base plate connection that we're wanting to place in our model. So when we go in, when we do this, we're going to have an existing connection already in place. We're going to go in, we're going to select the beam that we're going to use, and then we're going to select the connection that we have so that we can save that in our custom connections. Once we do that, we'll have a user connection template interface that will pop up that we can specify what we want to describe and show moving forward. With any type of these custom connections that we have that we're going to work with, we're going to have this user interface that will pop up that will get to specify the different things that we want to have happen. So if we want to have input that pops up that displays what we want it to say, we can go in and we can have that created based on that. So again, if we want to create that end plate or base plate connection and have it custom, we'll want to use that 1 beam with end to place in from there. The second one that we'll look at is the 1 beam and point. So if we're wanting to go in and we want to define a reference point on a specific beam that we want to use, we can use the 1 beam and point. So no matter what that point is, we can go in and we can define it saying, this is the point that we want this to be connected at. So similar to the 1 beam with end, we're going to select the beam first, then we're going to select the connection that we want to use and a reference point of where it's going to be placed in. That way, as we're placing it into other instances, and when we want to place it into other instances, we'll just be able to pick that point where we want to place it in and be able to utilize it from there. The third type of custom connection that we can make is the two beam custom connection. Again, when you have two beams that you're wanting to use, that you want to have a connection between, you'll go in, you'll select the beams that you want to use, then you'll continue on and select the connection that you want to have, that you want to use in your custom selections. So first beam, second beam, then the connection that you want to use while you're working with that. Again, you'll get that user interface that will pop up. Make sure that you specify exactly what you're wanting to have in place and what you're wanting to use with that connection setup. It will have you it will give you a selection prompt that you can input different information in, so you can specify, hey, this is the steps you need to take in being able to set this up and being able to place that in. So we have the two beams, and finally, the last connection that we'll look at with the custom connections, we'll look at the three beams. Again, very similar to the two beams, only this time you have three beams instead. You're going to select the beams that you have, first beam, second beam, then the third beam that you're going to use and you're going to work with from there. Then select the existing connection that you already do have in place. Once you have that in place, you'll be able to go in again, be able to put in command prompts based on what you're wanting to see and what you want to have set up based on those three selections that you're wanting to place in and you're wanting to use from there. So again, depending on what type of custom connection you want, you'll be able to manipulate it through a user template interface that you'll be able to specify everything that you're wanting to have in place and that you're wanting to use. So if we look a little bit more in depth with this and we go in, we'll look at our first one that we do want to put in place, which is our one beam at end. So I have a beam here, I have a base plate on it, and maybe I want to use this multiple times. This is a base plate that I've gone through and I've set up, and I want to use that for what I'm using at my company. I want to get that in place. This is the base plate that I use all the time. So we already have this in place. We already have this to work with. By going into our connection vault, which if you don't already have it opened, you'll find in your Home tab, in your extended modeling panel, under Connection Vault, and going to the base plate, this is where you can insert the base plate. As you're going through, it's helpful, it's easy in placing in, but we want to have a more custom connection to use. We don't always want to go to this connection vault and place in base plates through that, when we can go in and we can use this base plate multiple times in different situations. So in that case, we're going to go to our advanced steel tool palettes, which again can be found in the Home tab, extended modeling, and you have your advanced steel tool palette here that you can go in and you can use from there. This third box down is going to be the custom connections that you can use and that you can make as you're going in and you're utilizing advanced steel. Up at the top here, we can go in and we can create a connection template. This is where we're going to go in, and this is where we're going to define what type of custom connection that we want to have in place that we want to use. So if I want to create a custom connection, I can just click on this, and at that point it will pop up and will ask me to choose the definition method that I want to do. Well, I want to do this one beam with end. So I'll click on that and I'll go into this. At this point, it will ask me to select the beam that I want to use. I'll click on that beam, and then I'll get this user template that will pop up that will give me different information here. From here, it will say, give me a name that I want to use. So if I want to use a company base plate, I can type in company base plate. It would help if I could spell a little bit better, but maybe this is the company base plate that I want to have, that I want to use. Now, after I put in that name, the next thing under it is reselect driven / output objects. So this is basically saying we selected the beam, but what do we want to have as our output objects that we're going to use? So when I click on this, it will say for me to select the objects. So once I go to select the objects, I can select the objects that I'm using here. For this case, I want to get this connection box. I want to get this connection that's in place here. Once I do that, I can click enter. Under it, it will give me the situations that I'm looking at. So for this case, it's at the end. It's showing me that the beam is there and an endpoint. And now it's saying, okay, what driver selection prompts do I want to place in as I'm going in and using this? So if I want to just have select beam as my prompt, I can go in and I can click on select beam to make sure that's my prompt that I'm using. Once I'm done, I can hit the close, and now I can start worrying about going in and then utilizing this new connection that I made custom. So I got that inserted, I got that ready to go, and I'm ready to use that on something else. So if I go to another instance that's very similar, I can now use this to insert it in and be able to manipulate it from there. Right next to where we went and we did the creation of the connection template, we have insert connection template from there. From this point, I can click on here, and this will show me the connections that I have in this drawing. This will show me the connection templates that I have that I'm using as well. So it's already showing me this one that's in place that I can use from here. So if this is the one that I want to use, I can just hit OK. As I go in, again, select the beam that I want to use, and then that base plate comes in based on where I was working with it. Again, we can go back. We can allow object modification with it. We can change the name here. We can update it if it needs to be updated. But it's a way that we can go in and make sure that we have everything in place based on what we're wanting to see and what we're wanting to have set up as we go through and insert this in. So we looked at the one beam with the end. Well, maybe we have a reference point that we want to have, and we have this end plate here that we want to make sure that as we're going through, we have a specific endpoint that we need to recreate and use. Or we get it set up and we want to have this placed in, and sometimes our beams that we're going to use with end plates are going to be different lengths. So we want to go in, make sure it's specified with a reference point. Well, if I go back, I do my creation again. One beam and point this time, I'll click on that. Again, select the input beam that we want to use. So I can go in, I can select that input beam that's there and hit enter for that to go in. Now it's going to say select the input point that I want. So if I go here, maybe I want to go in and I want to make sure that this flange, the middle of the flange, is my input point. Once I do that, then I get my user template interface that will pop up. Again, what name do I want to give this? So maybe this is going to be the company end plate that I'm going to put in place. So I give it a specific name that I want it to have. Reselect driven, output objects, again, going in, selecting those objects that I want to have, that I want to use. Clicking enter again. At that point, again, it's giving us different situations that we can see. Once that's happened, now we can go in, selection prompts. So we can do beam, and we can type in beam, then we can do reference point, because we're going from a specific reference point that we want to place in. So we want to have the beam selected first, then the reference point after that, based on how we're putting that in place and based on what we're using from there as well. Once we get that, again, click the X, then we can go back and we can go to a similar situation and double check. Going back, insert the connection template that we want to use. Okay, well for this one, we're going to use the end plate this time. I want to put that one in. I'll hit OK, select the beam that I want to use, select the reference point, and now that's come in at the same point of where I wanted it and how I want to have that placed in. Again, just going in, being able to create it, being able to set it up and use it based on what type of connection that we want. Again, going in, changing the name if we need to, allowing the object modification. If we want to upgrade it to master, if we want to use it from there, we can set that up. We can use everything based on those aspects as well. So we got the one beam functions down, whether that was at the end or at a point. So now we're going to work with multiple beams now. So I have a connection here for multiple beams that I'm going to use. Again, going back, defining the method that I want to use. I'll use two beams. Select the input beam that I want to use. Enter. Select the second input beam I want to use. Enter. And then I will get that user template interface. Again, a name that I want to use, that I want to put in place. So if I put channel clip in for that, I can place that in there. Reselect driven output objects. Select this, hit enter. Again, it will show me the situations that I have. I might have different situations. It recognizes that this is the situation I'm in. If I need to have a different type, maybe I need a skewed angle or I need something else, it will show me the different situation based on that as well. Again, I can go in, selection prompts, beam, second selection prompt is beam, hit the X to cancel out of it. That way I can go back, and when I'm placing that in, when I'm inserting that in to use again, click there, click on the one that I want to use, that I want to work with, hit OK, selection prompt, first beam, select beam, second beam, and now that clip is in there that I can use and work with from there. So if that's what I want to have in place, that's what I want to use, I can go in and I can use that and get it in place from there. And finally, our last one that we can look at is three beams that we want to use. So if we're going in, if we're working with this, again, define what method that we want to use. We're going to use the three beam method. Select the input beam that we want to use, first one, second one, third one for the three beams. Again, what situation are we going to be in? Because it's a connecting and it's close, it already picks it. What name do we want to have? We can call this 3-beam, 2-beam. Selection prompts, beam, beam, beam. Select the driven output objects again that we want to use. Be able to select that from there. Enter. Once we have that in place, again, we can go back, click on the close button to go back. Then when we're placing that in, again, we're just going to follow the steps that we did before. 3-beam, 2-beam that we want to use. Click OK. Beam, 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 and it will place it in for us to use. So again, instead of going back, instead of copying things around or working with that, we can create this custom connection that we use that we put in place from there. As we go through it, it will be saved to a local place that we want to use. So if we go in, we'll want to make sure that we save it to this location, because this is where the connection templates will be in place that we want to use. This is where we can go back and use different connection templates. So if we want to share it with people in our company, if we want to share it with anybody else, we'll want to make sure that it's located in this spot so that we can go through it. People can get to it, people can use it. At that point, you get everything in place. So at that point, I can save this file. I can go to that location of where it was. So program data, Autodesk, advanced steel, and the year that you're using, the country that you're using, any shared connection templates, and I can just save this there. So that way I can go back and I can get to other connections that I want to use. Now that file is in there, I can have the connections that are in here and use it multiple times based on what I'm putting in place and what I want to use as well. Again, we don't want to keep on going back and recreating some of the things that are in place. We want to be able to go and be able to place that in and then insert it in where we want to place it and where we want to use it. At the end of the month, our next tech talk that we're going to look at is going to be looking at the differences in paper and model space in AutoCAD. So on July 31st, that's going to be the next tech talk that we'll look at from the AEC side of everything. So here's our upcoming tech talk from that aspect. We also have information here about our pilot class schedule. A lot of the information that I did go over, we cover in our advanced steel fundamentals class that we offer. We also have information here about our CAD Club Academy membership. If you are a CAD Club member, you do have access to this tech talk and previous tech talks that have been recorded that you can go back and get to as well. At this time, I'm open to any questions that you might have. If you don't have any questions that you can think of, you can always email me at the following location. But now's the time if you have any questions over anything that we covered in today's Tech Talk. And again, you can always email me if you have any questions down the road and anything from that point as well. So if it's anything that you're wanting to put in place that you're wanting to use or you just can't think of now, you have a question for later, don't hesitate to shoot me an email down the road with any questions. If you can't think of any questions now, then that has been the presentation of the custom connections in advanced steel. Thank you for taking time out of your day and joining me for this tech talk. And if no questions, then hopefully you guys have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week.